Hello, everybody. Welcome back to From the Other Sideline. I'm Melissa Triebwasser for Frogs Today. Each week we preview a TCU opponent. This week and for the last couple of weeks, we've only had one opponent to preview, and that is Michigan, as TCU is now just over a week away from making their first appearance in the college football playoff, where they will meet the Wolverines down in the Fiesta Bowl. As we take a big picture look at the postseason for the Horned Frogs, I am fortunate enough to be joined by the incredible Richard Johnson, someone who has spent a ton of time watching TCU here over the last couple of months because they have been worth watching. And so Richard's kind enough to join us to talk TCU Michigan and just kind of big picture landscape of what this opportunity means for the Horned Frogs. Richard, thank you so much for taking some time before the holidays to hop on.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Happy to be here.
Well, Richard, like I said, you've been at quite a few TCU games over the past over the 2022 season because of what the Horned Frogs have done and how they've accomplished it. Just kind of from the 30,000 foot view, what are your impressions of this TCU football team and kind of what they accomplished in 2022?
Yeah, it's funny because I kind of fell. So I've been to 4 TCU games. I've been to a third of the games. I've been to a third of I'm sure there are plenty of TCU fans that may have season tickets who have been to 4 games. I ended up almost kind of falling into it. So the Kansas game, what happened was the first couple times I went for the other team, basically. Like Kansas was hosting College Game Day for the first time in ever. So, I went for that. When the home game when they played Oklahoma State, I was there for both of them because they were both 5-0, and it was like, hey, what is this? And then obviously in the beginning of that game, things were not going so swimmingly for TCU. And then the Texas game, I went to Austin, and it was like, if they get through this game, they're probably gonna go to the playoff. This was kind of the last real test before the Big 12 championship game at the time. And obviously they won that game. And then obviously the Big 12 championship game was, go down there and then go to the celebration the next day. So it's kind of funny, kind of falling into following this team as they've gone through this season. It's been exciting. It's been fun. They're new blood, which is awesome. We had that with Michigan last year. When you get a team that hasn't been there, hasn't been on this stage, is happy to be here. It has unique stories, has cool stories like TCU does. It's a good thing. And so, yeah, I've had a lot of fun kind of being SI's TCU beat writer this season, for lack of a better term.
Well, I think that's been one of the greatest things for TCU fans is that it's been a long time. I mean, arguably since 2015 that TCU has kind of had a spot on the national stage, even just from a coverage perspective. And so to have all of the national writers, to have Sports Illustrated and The Athletic and all of these places that we all want to see TCU coverage be such a huge part of the story of the season has been really fun. You're an SEC guy, you're a Florida grad. It's not something we'll hold against you. Don't worry. But you're somebody who knows not just the teams that you cover, but in the SEC and now TCU, but the landscape of college football really well. Can you kind of put into perspective just how rare it is for a program to turn over an entire coaching staff, but keep most of the roster intact, especially in this era, and then have the success that Sonny Dykes had at TCU in his first year?
Yeah, this is the thing I keep people, friends of mine will ask, are what changed or whatever. I'm like, dude, this is the same team. It's the same team. It's yeah, they had some transfer portal guys, but it's the same key pieces. I mean, quarterback wasn't starting in fall camp. Or in week 1,
Yeah.
but he obviously Max came back but it's it's the same cast of characters. And so when you talk to people around the program, I've thought it is interesting how everybody pretty much ascribes it to vibes. The vibes are just miles different than they were at the end, late stage with Gary. And look, I understand Gary Patterson is a coaching legend, but there comes a time when I think there is a difference between builders and maintainers. And I don't know what Sonny will end up being in the long term. But there are guys, I think Gary Patterson was perfect for the TCU that was, in the Mountain West, coming up when they got in the Big 12, hard scrabble, all that kind of stuff. That's Gary's personality. Teams and programs are byproducts of their coaches a lot of times. And when you've had a coach for that long, this program really took over that kind of that kind of ethos, but it can get stale. It can, and I think it did at the end. And Gary is, you gotta love him. He can be a little prickly, I think, is the diplomatic way to say it. And so I get how things can become on deaf ears and how you just need a change, especially when the on-field product became lacking as it had been the last couple of years. And so just from that, you bring Sonny in, and some of this is like success begets success too, right?
Yeah.
It's like, my NFL team is terrible. I'm a Jags fan. They've been awful since 2017. Now they're having some success with Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence. And like, I connect those because like you just win like one or two of these games and people start to kind of buy in. Like
you beat the Cowboys,
or you beat the Cowboys. Like,
not a thing to talk about on a college football podcast about a DFW team, but that's okay. I'm not a Cowboys fan. It's fine.
Exactly. Like, you beat the Cowboys. Like, you beat Oklahoma State in double overtime. You beat Kansas. On the road when that place was charged up, and Kansas was driving to potentially win the game at the end. Like, when you win, like you stack a couple of these, there is something to be said for the very and I don't love to like ascribe things to like the momentum or the ethereal, ephemeral kind of like culture, but there is something to be said for that when you keep stacking these wins up and all that kind of stuff. And that's like, yes, there has been the emergence of Quentin Johnston, who's finally lived up to that. You know what I mean? Like, he's like one of the best receivers in the country. Okay, you had that emergence. Kendre Miller, absolutely star. Like, you've had these players step up at the right times to kind of coincide with that. But there's something to be said for there's great vibes for the program right now, which is just fun.
Well, you talk about, Kendre Miller, who I think we saw last year had the talent, the potential, especially when Zach Evans was dealing with injury issues. But Quentin Johnston, to me, is kind of the ultimate example, and Max Duggan to a degree as well, of when you put a square peg in a square hole, you start to see what they're capable of. Nobody talked about Quentin Johnston as not being an elite talent and having elite capabilities, but he didn't really get an opportunity to showcase. I mean, I think he more than doubled his previous career high in season receptions this year because he was given opportunities to be treated like a number one receiver. So how much of that goes back to Sonny Dykes just being kind of that CEO and putting an offensive mind in place that understood how to utilize and unlock those talents. Like you said, this is the same roster, and on offense, it's really the same guys. I mean, they're the only big transfer that played a ton of snaps for TCU this year was Alana Lee, who made a huge difference. But this is the same production that they had last year, producing in a completely different way.
Yeah, like Quentin Johnston, I think is so. If we treat I guess if we treat the Kansas game as the breakout, like I think that the one drive that they had when Garrett Riley just got him the ball, like Max just got him the ball. And I think that, and we talked to Quentin, we talked to Max, I remember after the game, and Max was like, yeah, like in practice this week, we just fed to him the ball in practice. And that's what they did on that drive. And I'll never forget, it was three sort of different catches where they got him the ball in different ways, and he just took over. Yeah. And they went like whatever it was, 95 yards on the touchdown drive, I think, and Quentin had like 80 of them.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like that, I think his superpower really, and look, there are plenty of receivers who are great at the catch point, all that kind of stuff, as he's great tracking the ball, deep balls over the shoulder, it's great. But he gives you an ability to put his back to the defense, give you a big target as Max Duggan, give Max a big target, and then the way he exits out of the catch is like, that is somebody that big, or that long, I should say, should not be able to use his footwork to be that smooth. And the way he's able to rotate, get out of the catch, and get his foot in the ground and go, like, that is what I think is really special when he gets going. And I know he hasn't really been healthy the last 4 or 5 weeks, kind of going to the Big 12 championship game. He hadn't really been 100%. So to finally see him at 100% or close to it in the Big 12 championship game, and remember, this is what this guy can do. That is, I think, going to be fascinating to me when we get to Phoenix, is how do you find a way to get him as your best player of the ball in your most in the most creative ways? Because he's an X factor and he should be the focal point.
Yeah, they're not a lot of 6'4" guys that are running jet sweeps at the wide receiver position.
No, they're
yeah,
not.
And maybe too many. I think TCU fans don't always love to see that when you have Darius Davis, but yeah, I mean, his athleticism is just uniquely special. And he's being projected in a lot of drafts to the Jaguars. So you might get to be a QJ fan for a little while longer.
I will deeply enjoy having that young man in teal and black for the next decade or so.
Yeah, him and Trevor Lawrence would be a really fun connection, especially with the rest of that young skill talent. Speaking of young skill talent, let's talk about Max. I think that it's really easy to obviously his story is unbelievable. I mean, he's a Hallmark movie. He's an after school special. He's all of those things, right? But what he has done for TCU and bringing them to the national stage probably cannot be overstated. How big is it going to be for this program going forward when you look to not just have a great season, but build a great program again? Having him as a Heisman finalist, having him, winning the Johnny Unitas and the David, all of these individual awards, and then taking TCU to the playoffs, and then also making the decision to announce to go pro before National Signing Day to give that kind of the portal and the recruiting for the quarterbacks of the future a little bit more of a timeline as well. What is that going to mean for TCU in the next 3, 4, 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, look, Sonny's, as this offense adapts outside of Max, once Max leaves and they get a different quarterback in, this offense is going to change. You're going to see them do things a little bit differently because they're going to have a guy, you would think, that I think is just more, I would say, naturally talented than Max. I don't want to denigrate Max Duggan. He's had a great season. It's been a great story, but Max Duggan is not as naturally talented of a thrower of a football as I think Sonny Dykes may have in the future. They may have.
Yeah, he's not a Sonny Dykes quarterback, right? He's the most atypical.
I mean, you've seen in the last 4 years, okay, there's a reason why he was not the starting quarterback on September 1st. I do think though that when they do get the quarterback in that maybe they want, that is their true guy that they did not inherit from a different system, you may see things get a little bit more kind of trend towards more of the classic kind of pass happy air raid. Now, you may not want to do that next year because, you get DeMarcado back, you've got running backs, you may want to continue to lean on that. And I know Garrett Riley, there are a lot of differences, I should say, with Garrett and Lincoln's offense, but I do believe that they both believe in running the ball. And so you're still going to have that you're not going to get full, Mike Leach air raid, I don't think, in the future here of this offense. But how Sonny Dykes, how they do pivot the offense in the future, I think will be fascinating.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, that there's going to have to be some growth and some adaptation. I mean, they'll get Chandler Morris back, they'll get Sam Jackson, so they'll still kind of be in that dual threat quarterback mode in the future. But when you look at TCU's got a commitment for a class of 2024, Marcos Davila today, we're recording this on Thursday, who's definitely more of that pro style guy that can move a little bit in the pocket. And so, yeah, I think as they start to recruit the types of players that they want to fill the roster, we'll definitely see some adaptations, but they're also going to have the opportunity to recruit the type of guys that they want based off of the season and the development that Max Duggan showed. When you look at recruiting, TCU is going to finish in the top 20. It looks like probably around number 17. They're still, as of recording, waiting on one more signee that could vault them into the top 15. What do you think of what Dykes has done on the recruiting trail with that staff, and how big of a bump did making the college football playoffs give them this year?
Yeah, so I don't think it's any secret that Brian Carrington leaving is a pretty big deal. Yeah. That is going to be something they're going to, if I'm not mistaken, I believe he flipped a couple of guys from the state to Arizona State, if I'm correct in seeing.
Not from TCU, but I do think he did get some. Yeah, there was a rumor going around that Warren Roberson was potentially a flip, but that's been discounted. But he's certainly been in the ears of some of the guys that TCU's been talking to for the Sun Devils for sure.
Yeah, look, Carrington's a hitter. And they're gonna have to replace that. Now, obviously, he wanted to get back on the field and all that kind of stuff. So yes, more power to him. And you know, everybody would want a promotion, but you're gonna have to replace his impact on the recruit, Joe. You're gonna have to replace that. Obviously, Sonny is not going to be hurting for ties to the state of Texas. Like, it's not like he's a complete outsider and he doesn't know the landscape. But you know, having a guy on your staff like that was pretty good to have a closer. Now, yeah, does it speak for itself this season? Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. I don't think you could or should have expected that to show up this recruiting class.
Yeah.
That's more of a long tail thing, as you say, hey, you know, we're here for real. But as Texas and Oklahoma are leaving, probably earlier than 2025, they're leaving. You now have a why not us scenario with the rest of the Big 12. Why not? This is where I come back to, like, why not TCU in this place? They're already winning a conference with Texas and Oklahoma in it right now. And they've obviously competed in that conference over the last 10 years since they joined the league. It's not like they weren't competing in this league when Oklahoma was still going to the playoff every year or every other year. So this conference is for the taking right now, especially given with who's leaving. When Cincinnati comes in, Cincinnati that doesn't have Luke Fickell, I don't think that Cincinnati scares you as much. UCF, the UCF will be a force to be reckoned with. I'll tell you that right now. With Gus Malzahn, you're gonna have to deal with that. BYU, okay, it's not like it's just going to be a bunch of also rans, but there isn't anybody right now that is bona fide that I would say is coming into this league and going to change everything overnight.
Well, TCU's been the clear number 3 in recruiting, even, you know, before Texas and Oklahoma left. I think they finished third or right around third or fourth for most of the last 5 or 6 years since that 2014 season. And so, yeah, I mean, there's only one team, or there'll be 2 teams in 2024 outside of Oklahoma that can say they've participated in the college football playoff. There'll only be, one that has a quarterback that finished second in the Heisman in recent history. So, yeah, I think that's kind of the feeling is TCU should be the flagship program in the Big 12 for the coming, the immediate future, as long as they can continue to build on its momentum, which I think most TCU fans would expect they can do. Let's turn our attention now to the Fiesta Bowl and the matchup. So somebody with more of a national perspective, I think TCU fans are already getting sick of being told the Big 12 is soft and that they can't compete. They won't have seen anybody as physical as Michigan in the whole season, or their whole season, or maybe in the last 10 years. Somebody who's seen the SEC, who's covered this, like I said, nationally. What do you think of is the Big 12 properly slated as being a soft conference, or is that still just an outdated perception that gets tossed around?
No, I definitely think it's outdated. I mean, you look at what Oklahoma State did last year. I mean, Oklahoma State last year was coming after you. I don't think it's a situation where the Big 12 is this like pass happy, they can't run the ball kind of stuff. And I think TCU has shown that as much this year. Honestly, I think the biggest kind of flag bearer for that is Kansas State. Like, Kansas State ain't worried about it. Like, Kansas State will win how they win. And I know, obviously TCU was on the wrong end of that, the Big 12 championship game. And if Adrian Martinez would have been healthy in the October game, who knows how that would have went. I will say this though, TCU is stepping up as far as a level of physicality with Michigan. Like, you could slice it any way you want. This Michigan team is serious. And this Michigan team, from a physicality standpoint, the bona fides are there. Like, this is not just like a talk is cheap. And it's funny because Michigan, there's always a bigger fish. Like, Michigan, I remember, so I was at the Georgia semifinal last year, Georgia, Michigan. And I remember leaving the stadium. I was in an elevator with the Michigan beat writer, and he looked at me. He was like, "Man, it's like they were playing a different sport out there, Georgia." And there's always a bigger fish in this sport.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you that right now.
Unless you're Georgia.
unless you're Georgia, yes, there is always a bigger fish. But I'm telling you, there is a reality in this game, and if I'm a TCU person, I'm worried about that. There's a reality in this game where Michigan just steamrolls you.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you this right now, Donovan Edwards is a different cat. I think Blake Corum is a really good running back, and they obviously miss him. But Donovan Edwards has a different gear as a running back. And I think the way he is able to generate explosive plays, just himself, is different than what Michigan has really had most of the season, because he wasn't the featured back. You saw it in the Ohio State game. The guy, he runs with a patience, and then he's got a burst that really, really changes things. My fear in this game is that TCU doesn't generate explosive plays, many explosive plays. TCU, I think, I don't think TCU can win this game if they don't generate explosive plays.
Yeah.
I do think Michigan can. Michigan can win this game if they grind it out and they just 3 yards, cloud of dust, matriculate, all that kind of stuff. I'm not so sure TCU can win that style of game against this Michigan team.
Yeah, no, I think that's going to be the key, is that, you don't, there's no favorables for TCU in the trenches on either side of the ball. Their defensive line, TCU's defensive line, is not better than Michigan's offensive line, and TCU's offensive line is not better than Michigan's defensive line. Like, you're going to lose that battle, I think, at the line of scrimmage. The key is, can you out athlete or out skill talent offensively against what's been a pretty good Michigan secondary, but there's still, I think, opportunities to.
Yeah, I would not say Michigan's defense is as good as last year's was.
Yeah.
Last year's Michigan defense basically said, we've got 2 pretty good college edge rushers. We're going to sick them on you, and it's going to help us on the back end. This year they've got 1 bona fide. I think Mozzie Smith's a really good player.
Yeah.
And we've got 1 bona fide. We're still going to try to win up front, and then the back end will hold. And that's still kind of the way they're trying to skin a cat. I do think that as far as TCU goes, you just got to find a way to keep, like, my thing with TCU is, I think TCU is a slightly worse version of Michigan, like in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
When you stack them up next to each other, and I just don't know. I don't know how that's going to play. And I don't know how that's going to work. Now, however, if you could get the Texas game where both teams really aren't doing much, and it's who can take advantage of whose mistakes. Like, the Texas game was Kendre Miller busting a broken play and Quentin Johnston busting a broken play. Like, Quentin Johnston said after the game, he was like, yeah, I was surprised it was that open.
Yeah, so that's
why he jumped and why he caught it that way. Now, if you get something of that's like a relative stalemate, and you could take advantage of that being a close game and mistakes, okay, maybe. But I look at this Michigan team as the better team, the more seasoned team. They are used to this stage. They are here for it. I will say, in the Big 12 championship game, I was a little disconcerted with probably the first 2.5 quarters. They weren't really pressuring Will Howard much.
Yeah.
And they weren't really getting to him. I don't think JJ McCarthy's the best quarterback in the country, but you gotta force him to do a little something. You gotta force him to not just sit back there, because I think I think Michigan is gonna have a slightly different makeup and slightly different gear than the first 10-ish games. If you get the version of Michigan that came out against Illinois and really had to struggle for it, again, they struggled in that and they won. They can win that rock fighty kind of game. But I look at how they beat Ohio State, which is much more, we're going to take our shots over the top in the play action passing game. We're going to hit every single one of them. And then Donovan Edwards is going to ice the game and be our closer at the end. That's a script that they can make work if JJ McCarthy has really and truly taken a step up. If TCU is not going to get pressure on him and he's going to be able to sit back there, I don't know. That's going to be that is the makings of a long night.
Well, and that's what's going to be interesting to me, because I think when you look at Will Howard and JJ McCarthy, one thing that remains true for both of them is kind of young quarterbacks. And Will Howard had started some games, but they're completely different statistically under pressure. Like, they completely change. But what I'll be interested to see is is I would argue, and I could be wrong on this, but I would argue that what TCU has in Travius Hodges-Tomlinson and Josh Newton is better than what Ohio State has at cornerback. And so, are those guys going to be able to hold up on an island one-on-one against Michigan's receivers, which we've shown they have elite talent like they did in Ohio State, but have also had the propensity to make drops, and they don't really have a go-to guy.
I'm not, if I'm TCU, I'm not terrified of Ronnie Bell. Like he's a good player. I'm not saying he's not a good player.
Yeah.
But I'm not like, if I was playing Ohio State, I'm terrified of Marvin Harrison.
Sure.
Like I'm terrified of Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm not like, I do agree that I think TCU's corners can probably handle Michigan from a wide receiver standpoint.
But not if they're having to hold up in coverage for 5-6 seconds.
No,
like that's going to be the issue. And I think we saw Dylan Horton really come on strong. I mean, Demonic Williams, who, was at the beginning of heading into the Colorado game, was 17. He's obviously gotten better. And the biggest thing is TCU's been so banged up defensively. I mean, all of those guys have been in and out of the lineup. And so having that 3.5 weeks or so to heal up, you get a fresh TCU defense, maybe they can generate a little bit more pressure early. We've seen all season that you get into the second half and Joe Gillespie and Garrett Riley both are just elite adjusters at halftime. But you can't afford to do that if you're down 17-0 in a playoff game or 17-7. They're gonna have to be within a score, I think, of Michigan at the half in order to make those adjustments work.
I think that the big, like, one of the other kind of under the radar things that TCU is going to have to execute well is short yardage stuff.
Yeah.
If you're in 3rd and 2 and getting stuffed, if you're at the goal line and not coming away with points, this is going to be a bad time. It's going to be a bad time if you drive all the way down there and you trade a 3 for a 7. That is the one thing that a lot of people aren't really going to talk about that, but under the radar, you have if it gets into 4th and 1 and you're going for it because you're riverboat gambler and Michigan's stuffing you, that is going to be a problem. And that is one thing that they got to get that right too.
Well, and it's something that Sonny talked about after the Big 12 championship, and he's talked about, after practices this year, this prep, is that they've got to be a better red zone team. TCU has converted at a high rate touchdowns over field goals, but only because they're going for it so much on 4th down. They still are not. They're not great in short yardage situations and in the red zone. And time again, we've seen them, even with Kendra Miller, who's so good, needing a yard, needing 2 yards and not being able to get that. Obviously, that's how the Big 12, championship game pretty much ended. And so I think that making those adjustments and having some time, TCU also has played now 10 straight games, and having 3 weeks to actually prep for an opponent when they haven't had a bye week to prep for a Big 12 opponent all year. Maybe that'll give Garrett Riley some time to get creative in those. All that being said, all of the places where TCU can lose this game, outside of generating explosive plays, what is there a matchup that you see where TCU has such a distinct advantage, or something that they can take advantage of the Michigan defense to where they might be able to generate some easy offense and put themselves in a position to kind of pull off this upset?
What TCU can generate some easy offense?
Yeah.
To feed Quentin Johnston. Like, there are times when I try not to be really reductive about offensive football, but like, you have a very special player out there. Get him the ball. Figure out ways. Yeah, and he's healthy. Figure out ways to get him the ball in creative ways. Quick game. The fact that he can operate in quick game is a big deal. Yeah. And I also I look at kind of under the radar guys and see Tay Barber's got a gear in him.
Good.
You know what I mean? Look, Tay Barber's not going to catch 8 balls on Saturday night. I don't think it's going to happen. But he's got a gear in him where you can use Quentin as a decoy and get Tay the ball in space, and he can go.
And if you target him 5 times, he's going to catch it 4. I mean, that dude is reliable, and he's a safety net.
Right. And so I think you can use Quentin Johnston by not using Quentin Johnston in those kind of ways. Was it the Baylor game? I think that Tay Barber had the really long touchdown catch.
Well, I think he ran out of gas because he's 40, but he was it was like a 50-yard reception. He was like, no, I'm done. I'm going out of bounds.
Yeah. So that is something where I think, because they look, Michigan is not exactly obviously facing the best, most intricate passing games in the country with their schedule. The Penn State game, look, they got up and then so that game script is a little bit different. But Ohio State showed it's not like you can't. get at them through the air.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like you can't get at Michigan. Now, again, Ohio State's got a transcendent receiver, but Quinn Johnson, like we said, is no slouch. And so, yeah, so I think with the passing game, I think that may be the more reliable way to try to generate explosive plays in this game over the running game, even though Kendre is such a big home run threat and such a big home run hitter in the running game.
So I'm not going to ask you to make a score prediction because I don't think I want to hear it based on everything that you've said so far. But I do want to ask you, so you'll be down in Glendale, you'll be at the Fiesta Bowl covering it, right? So what is one thing that you're really going to be watching, or one thing that you're excited to see in this game that maybe the casual fan wouldn't be paying attention to?
So if this is a close game, if this ends up being a close game, Michigan's kicker is like insane. Michigan's kicker is really good. They trust him. And so if this ends up being something like a 3-point game, they are not worried about sending Jake Moody out there, and they're not worried about sending him out there to hit like a 55-yarder, or at least try a 55-yarder. So again, this is a thing where when you get teams in this situation, like if it sounds like I'm playing on margins, it's because I am. Like this is like you've got two good teams in a big spot. And that's when this stuff happens. That's when these little marginal gains and these little marginal things, that's when they become truly, truly important.
And then just kind of to wrap it up, how, we've seen so often these teams get in that everybody says don't belong. You can talk about Cincinnati, you can talk about Washington, you can talk about Florida State. They show up in the college football playoffs and they get just steamrolled. How important is it for a team like TCU to have a quote unquote good showing on this stage, or is making it enough for these kind of, I don't want to say second tier, but non-blue blood, non-powerhouse programs?
Well, I think the question is different if we aren't coming into 12 teams in a couple years here. Like it's because we're coming to 12 teams, like you would have, TCU, in air quotes, winning their way to a semifinal, if, in an alternate reality, let's say. You'd have TCU winning their way there versus just kind of getting there. Like, I personally don't take a lot of stock into how teams do that doesn't validate whether they belong there or not. You earned your way into the dance. What you do there is a different story, because again, these are not like 1 week game. These are not 1 week quick turn games, right?
Yeah.
Like Michigan, these coaching staffs have had 3-4 weeks to really prepare for everything that your team does. It makes it different than just a, we're playing next Saturday type thing. So there are some reasons why I think that these playoff games, especially the semifinal games, are different propositions because of the long lead up that they have.
Yeah, I think if you're TCU, obviously like going 12-0 and then not having the Big 12 championship trophy sitting in your Hall of Fame, you're still putting up a college football playoff participant banner at Amon G. Carter Stadium. I think you tweeted about that. No matter what this guy, I don't care if it's 50-0, that's still going on the wall, and TCU fans are going to love to see it. Richard, thank you so much for taking some time for hanging out for us a little bit. SEC Network, where Split Zone Duo podcast, where can people find your work? Where are you posting?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, RJ_Wrights, and then I'm in the pages of Sports Illustrated, the digital pages in Sports Illustrated. I'll be there at the game for them. I do a podcast called Split Zone Duo. We have a lot of fun too, talking all things college football. And then during the season, I'm on the SEC Network. So I am doing a lot of things, spinning a lot of plates, but it's always a lot of fun.
Hey, we also got to put in a plug for Sinful 7. So it's free until Christmas, correct? For people that want to try to encapsulate this in your 30 seconds, because I don't know if you can do it in 30 seconds.
It's
Tell people what this is.
Very difficult to do. Sinful 7 during the pandemic, me and Spencer Hall, Jason Kirk, Tyson Whiting, who did our illustrations, and Alex Kirshner came together and created this crazy story that's half fiction, half nonfiction, and it's a sci-fi Western, if that makes any sense to you. And it encapsulates the history of college sports, and it tells that story, particularly at a very, very a very important inflection point in the organization, and a very important inflection point that you can trace a direct line to where we are now with all the craziness of this NIL transfer portal all that kind of stuff. It all goes back to this specific moment in time, and we kind of take that story and make it, not boring, and make it really fun. And it's an illustrated ebook. It's a fiercely creative project. It's a fiercely bold project. It's something that I'm still really, really proud of, that we did, and I think I always will be. It is free until Christmas on sinful7.com. That's everything spelled out, Sinful7. And then after that, I don't know what we're going to do with it, because we got to figure something out.
Yeah, it's free, and you could also, but you can pay for it and give a donation to the creative minds behind it for sure too. So again, Richard, thank you so much. I am sure that we will be dragging you over in front of the camera for some Frogs Today stuff when you're down in Glendale. We'll get you around too. So this won't be the last time people can see you, but really appreciate your time and your insight into this game, and all your great coverage of TCU all season long. Like I said, it's always so awesome to see TCU in these national pages, and you've done an incredible job helping tell the Horned Frog story this season.
Absolutely. I'll see you in Phoenix.